Anybody here in the audience have parents that told them that college was not optional, it was mandatory, that when they graduated high school, they had to go to college? Pretty good number of you. I did too. That plan backfired on my parents when I went to college and told them I was majoring in English literature. I did tell them that I loved cooking, and when I graduated college, got my mandatory degree, I was going to try cooking. My dad, of all people, and if you knew my dad, you would know how improbable it was, that he told me that I should follow my passion and I should cook. And so I went to culinary school and I graduated, and it was about 10 years later that I confronted him and I said, "Dad, you weren't really pushing me to follow my passion. You were thinking, what the hell's he going to do with a degree in English literature?" And my dad just looked at me and smiled and patted me on the back and said, "But you love what you do." So, touche, Dad. I went to culinary school and graduated, and I had one goal in mind. I was going to be an executive chef, and I was going to own my own restaurant. And in 2007, I did it. I sold my house. I took out a loan. I bought into a restaurant. The economy crashed. But still, in that first year of ownership, I grew the business 38%. And I was nominated for Best Up-and-Coming Chef in Dallas. That first year, I went out to a Dallas County juvenile detention facility and taught 8 young men to make ice cream for an ice cream competition at the Dallas Farmers Market. The moment I met those 8 young men, I realized immediately that I had stereotyped them before I ever met them. The way they walk, the way they talk, thug, hood, gangsta. I knew I was wrong because all 8 of them looked me in the eyes and all 8 of them called me sir. Now, I've cooked for 20 years now, and I've been called a lot of names in a lot of languages and a lot of kitchens. No language was it ever sir. If I was lucky, it was chef without an adjective in front of it. If. These kids were so enthusiastic to learn. They were so energetic about doing something that they could be proud of. And for all 8 of them, you could tell it was a first-time feeling. Never mentioned the fact that to them, raspberry was a flavor of candy. They had never seen or tasted a fresh raspberry. So you can imagine what happened when I tried to make them eat fresh tarragon. They thought I was making them eat grass. We made ice cream, and 2 days later, the county bussed them down to the farmer's market, and these kids stood so proud alongside college culinary students. And at the end of the competition, one of the young men actually won the whole thing, beat the college students and everybody. And when he won, first thing he did was he came running up to me, bent his knees, cocked his arms, and in my face, screaming at the top of his lungs, "Sir, I just love to cook!" And I did the only thing that I could possibly think to do in that moment. I bent my knees, cocked my arms, and got right in his face and screamed, "Sir, me too!" And he said when he got out of jail, he was going to get a job in a restaurant. And then he asked my professional opinion. "Sir, do you think I should work at Wendy's or Chili's?" And of course, I professionally told him wherever hires you first, and then whoever pays you the most money second. And I drove home that day realizing 2 things. Number one is I was never going to see him again. He was a child under custody of the juvenile department. They were not going to give a stranger his private information, his personal information. Number 2, I realized that at the end of the day, when he got out, he was going to go right back to the same house, the same street, the same neighborhood, the same school, the same gangs, the same poverty, the same crime, the same drugs, every single thing that had pushed him directly on a path to jail. And I thought, it's not fair. It's not right. I didn't do anything to earn my opportunity in life, and he didn't do anything to earn his path either. And I blamed every one of you. And then I realized I can blame everybody all day long, but unless I want to step up and do something, then I'm just a hypocrite. And I didn't want to do that. So I said, I'm going to do something. I had no idea what it was. About a year had passed. I was on the phone talking to my business partner, closing down the restaurant, and I was just complaining. It's been a year. I've done nothing. I am the hypocrite. I promised them I'd help them. I've done absolutely nothing. And she snapped at me and said, "Then what do you want to do?" Full disclosure, I had been drinking bourbon. Some good ideas happen. And I said, I just want to open a restaurant and let these kids run it. And she's like, that's not a bad idea. I was like, I know. And thus the idea for Cafe Momentum was born. It's one of the top restaurants in Dallas. It's a nonprofit restaurant. It's a 12-month paid post-release internship for young men and young women exiting Dallas County juvenile detention facilities. Over the course of 12 months, we haven't even gotten to the good stuff yet. Over the course of 12 months, the interns worked their way through all the stations in a restaurant, from dishwasher to prep cook, line cook, busser, server, host, hostess. And while they're working their way through those stations, they're not just learning employment skills, they're learning life skills and social skills. Things like looking someone in the eye when you speak to them. Things like disagreeing appropriately. We have a case management team that works to build an ecosystem of support around our interns, holistically addressing urgent needs like housing. 62% of the kids that work in our program are homeless. Healthcare. Getting a government-issued ID. All the way to more intermediate things like getting them a bank account, getting them back into school, getting them on pace in school, teaching them parenting classes, to long-term objectives, like they get ready to graduate our program, they write a resume, they interview for a job with one of our employment partners, and then they begin an externship working with them and with us. Now, all of this, I think, sounds pretty awesome, but I went around telling people, I'm going to open a nonprofit restaurant working with juvenile offenders, and the first thing people would say is, aren't all restaurants nonprofit? And I'd say, yes. At least you know I'm honest. Then they would say things like, so you're going to take kids out of jail and teach them to play with knives and fire, and you think I'm going to give you $1? And I would say things like, no, I asked for $250,000. I was very specific. And then they would say things like, what are you going to do when those kids stab each other in the kitchen? Those kids don't want to work. They just want to check. Those kids don't know good food. They can't cook in your restaurant. And I realized that I had to break through some even bigger, more horrific stereotypes. So in June 2011, we launched our very first pop-up dinner. And the idea behind the pop-up dinners was very simple. Go into one of the top restaurants in Dallas on a Sunday night when they're closed, have the chef write a 4-course menu, sell tickets to the private dinner, and then his or her staff to not only execute the food in the kitchen, but serve it to the level and quality of service of that restaurant were 8 young men that we would bus in from one of the Dallas County juvenile detention facilities. First dinner, we wanted to get 50 people to pay $50. I had no confidence that anybody would show up. I had devised a masterful plan to call my mom and have her guilt the ladies in her Bible study class into buying at least half the tickets. Before we could shut down PayPal, after we announced the dinner 24 hours later, we had sold 68 seats. In June of 2011, 68 people showed up at a dinner, and before they left, they either shook my hand or they gave me a hug and said, you know, this could be my son. By December of 2011, we doubled the price from $50 to $100, and it sold out in 15 minutes. And by spring of 2012, our dinners were selling out in 15 seconds. In the summer of 2012, that voice, I wasn't drinking bourbon this time, but the voice did go off in my head. And I said, you know, it's one thing to tell the kids you believe in them, but it's another thing to walk the talk. And I decided that if I wanted to prove to the kids that I truly did believe in them, then I would bet my career on them. And so I did. On September 1st, 2012, I became the first executive director and executive chef of Cafe Momentum, a restaurant that was an idea and didn't even exist. The restaurant itself opened on January 29th, 2015, and in March, Dallas Morning News food critic Leslie Brenner visited us to review us. Now, for those of you that aren't foodies, God bless you. But those that are, you may have heard of Leslie because Leslie has a reputation not just in Dallas, but across the United States, and her reputation is that she hates every restaurant that she goes to review. In her review of Cafe Momentum, she wrote that on any given night, we can go toe-to-toe with the best restaurants in the city. And in the fall of 2015, Dallas Observer named us Best New Restaurant, and Eater Dallas named us Restaurant of the Year. And those are all accolades that we're very proud of. We're chefs, we got egos. But most importantly, we're proud because it proves a very important lesson that these young men and these young women can and will rise to whatever level of expectation you set for them. You just have to give them the tools, the resources, the love, the guidance, and the support to get there. Now, at Cafe Momentum, our program extends beyond the four walls of the restaurant, and we do research data, study data, accumulate data. We have one very important statistic that we watch all the time, and that's recidivism. In the state of Texas, 48.3% of the young people that go to jail once will go back within 12 months. Half the kids that go to jail once will go back within 12 months. And in Texas, it costs us as taxpayers $127,000 to incarcerate a child with a 50-50 shot that they'll be back within 12 months. And if they go back, it's pretty much guaranteed they're going to spend the rest of their life going in and out, in and out, in and out. At Cafe Momentum, of the nearly 500 kids that we've worked with, only 15.2% have ever gone back to jail, which means that Dallas Mayor Mike Rawlings owes me a check for $19.8 million. Because that's how much money we've saved taxpayers. But the mission of Cafe Momentum is not to keep kids out of jail. Our mission statement clearly states to help them achieve their full potential, which is a far cry from incarceration. So I'm going to quickly tell you a story about one of our graduates, a young man named Abasai. Abasai is the son of Mexican immigrants. His parents came across the border, got jobs at immigrants get, got married, started a family, and they ended up getting divorced. And when they divorced, it meant Abasai went from living in poverty to living in higher poverty. It meant he went from living in a bad neighborhood to living in a really bad neighborhood. It meant that he didn't want to ask his mom for things that she might complain that his dad should provide. He didn't want to ask his dad for things that he would complain that his mom should provide. So he turned to the streets to survive. He turned to the streets to figure out how to accumulate resources to get food, to get clothes, basic necessities. He ended up in jail and he went through our program. He graduated August of last year, and upon graduating, went to work for one of our employment partners, a large hotel just outside downtown Dallas. And within 3 months, at 17 years old, he was promoted from busboy to barback and made between $700 and $1,000 a week with full health benefits, paid vacation, and a 401k. Now, what that tells us is the story is no longer about Abasai. The story is about his kids. It's about his grandkids. It's about them not growing up in a household where high school is optional. Because in January, I got to watch Abasai walk across the stage as the first ever high school graduate of his family. It's about them growing up in a household where college is not optional. Because in August, I got a phone call from Abasai after he finished his first day of college classes where he plans on majoring in mechanical engineering. It's about them becoming productive, contributing leaders in their own community. And that excites us so much because it completely changes the narrative of they can't to they can, that we did a study and looked at, if we work with 100 kids a year, what is the generational effect? If Cafe Momentum works with 100 kids a year, the effect across 5 generations is over 2,500 lives every year. If Cafe Momentum works with 100 kids a year, and you take the money you save by keeping 5 generations from repeating a cycle of incarceration, and you add the money that they contribute back into their own communities, the ones that need it the most, the total is $389 million. Now, I never did get that degree in English literature, but I'm pretty sure if you looked it up in the dictionary, that would be the definition of momentum. Thank you.